Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the quarantine film series. We are back. I'm coming to you live. I'm your host, Kabir Segal, coming to you from the ATL, Atlanta, Georgia. I'm still quarantining here at home. And when I thank my mom for watching, my parents for watching, I need the whole Wi-Fi signal. So if you could please cooperate just for a few minutes, and then you can get back to your day, Mom. I appreciate it. So look, we started this series back in March to put the spotlight back on creative individuals, musicians, authors, filmmakers, storytellers of all types. Creative calendar was essentially canceled. And, with this pandemic enduring, it's been difficult for artists of all stripes. Film festivals were canceled, concerts were canceled, gigs. So this is an opportunity to put the spotlight back on the people that create the content that inspire, challenge, provoke, entertain us throughout the year. Because artists really give us their soul. They put so much heart and energy into what they do. So if you want to stay in the loop, as to who's going to be on the show, obviously subscribe to my social media. We're broadcasting everywhere. Secondly, if you want to get booked, just hit me up on, you're going to be on the show and you're an artist, send me a note by my social media and we'll try to work it out. All right. One more thing. Let us know where you're watching from. Drop a comment in the field if you're watching live or if you're watching on the rebroadcast. Let us know city, states, countries, counties. I love learning counties. I want to learn the geography of the world. Extra points for counties. I mean it. Even if you're we're getting people watching in Kuala Lumpur. We get a lot of people in Malaysia. So I want to learn more about Kuala Lumpur. Tell me about where you're watching from. Secondly, if you have questions for the artist, drop it in the comment field. We'll ask the artist to opine. All right. So that is my spiel. Now for the best part of the show, where we get to meet the remarkable artist, and she really is. What I really like about who we're featuring today is she's a creative mind. She has a business mind. She's fusing right brain, left brain. She is part of the international programs team, serving as project director for the moving image strategies at the Ford Foundation. Previously, she ran Just Films. Everyone in the documentary world space kind of knows who she is. She's been a producer. She ran the Sundance Institute documentary film program, and she then was previously she was the executive producer of the PBS documentary series POV. So it's kind of like a whole rundown of, she's been at the nexus of art and documentary and storytelling for many years, and she's a creative artist, and she's very inspiring because she has the pulse of the industry and the film world. So please welcome to the show the remarkably talented creative mind, Cara Mertes. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, Kabir.
My pleasure. So let me ask you first, how has the quarantine affected you? What did you have lined up? Has your life been affected?
Well, I would say, like everybody else, it's radically affected everything. It's completely inverted. That's how I think about it. It's turned everything inside out. And there are people that have been so deeply affected by it. A lot of those folks are people that Ford works with. And around the world, my team, the folks that I work with are around the world. So on any given day, I'll be on the line with Nairobi or Cape Town or Indonesia, speaking of Malaysia, Indonesia, China, and the effects are so different everywhere. So I think for me personally, I used to spend a lot of time traveling, getting my body from place to place, commuting 3 hours a day back and forth, making long trips. All of that completely stopped. The office has been closed. It will be closed for some more months while this plays out. And so you kind of really get a chance to reorganize how you work and how you are most productive. And I think that's been the evolving sort of pattern. It's like, how do you put your best into the world with a whole new regime of being productive?
Yeah, and I want to ask about that. How do you spend your day to day? Do you have a routine? How do you make sure it's not Groundhog Day? Do you take a cup of coffee in the morning? Do you wake up at the same time?
Yep. It's become much more regulated, actually. It's like up at 6 or 6:30, coffee, run, walk, just doing that kind of health stuff in the morning, and then start working and work on, through the day, but making sure that you toggle back and forth between being online and reading and writing, and then of course we've got two kids, one in college who we're in touch with a lot, and then we have a teenager, we have a high schooler here at home, and so I'm also parenting at the same time as trying to be productive in the workspace. So
sharing that. I also want to ask you about, of course, on your professional side, what is moving image strategies? Describe what your current role is and what the Ford Foundation is doing in the film and even broadly entertainment space.
sure, yeah, no, it's really built on, if you so kindly like listed some of the things that I've done in the recent past. So I'd say, building on what I learned at POV, as a broadcast entity and a co-production entity, Sundance was all about how do you really understand the artistic process and how do you really center artists in, the resource and the infrastructure building, and taking both of those things and then going to Just Films. With Just Films, it was started, launched, hatched by Orlando Bagwell, the amazing filmmaker. And when I came in, it was really mostly focused on the US, and it was designed to be a film fund, a feature-length documentary film fund. And what we were able to do is actually integrate it across all of Ford's 10 offices. So now we're working around the world. We created a global South-facing network of 12 organizations working together with each other. So South to South, North to South, and South to North. And these organizations were really ramping up and coming together in the independent nonfiction space. And then I was incubating right around the edges of that a bunch of new kind of initiatives that really looked at narrative change and pop culture and thinking about artists and activists and movement building all together. So the Detroit Narrative Agency was created out of this time. The Pop Culture Collaborative emerged at this time. Large groups of people actually putting their minds on the intersection of creative storytelling and societal relevance and societal impact. And so we took that incubation zone and made it the center of what we're doing with the moving image strategies now, as a way to really expand the foundation's thinking about what kind of creative moving image storytelling we can thread through the strategies in order to really have much more impact on the work that we're really concentrating on. So those are things like natural resource extractions and climate change, broad-based strengthening civil society, which we know artists and cultural workers are key to. So the team that I'm working with now is actually based in those 10 offices. And there's, I'd say about 15 of us that are working on a regular basis, thinking about this and expanding our notions of what's possible, doing research and learning. And this incubation time is really meant to kind of build the architecture, run it, refine it, and then hopefully have a more permanent, ongoing resource that takes up this work.
Got it, got it. Janet in Detroit has a question, actually. She says, how do you know when a film is a Ford Foundation worthy film? Do you have a checklist that you work through that serves as criteria for a film that you support?
Yeah, well, I mean, with the Just Films, I won't speak to the current, but how it was built. Yes, it wants to be feature length. It wants to have relevance to the issues that we work on. And what I always think about is the idea of centering the voices and perspectives of the communities that are being profiled. How are you doing that? How are you achieving that? And then the notion of transformational storytelling that is really trying to, for instance, invent a new cinematic grammar, or really trying to do something intentional in the world. And those kinds of transformational storytellers are people like, say, Ramel Ross, I consider to be a transformational storyteller. If you think about the work that he did on Hale County this evening, which we supported. Yancey Ford is a transformational storyteller. The incredible work that he did on Strong Island. These are examples of films that really both drive the art form forward and also drive our sort of social discourse forward.
Sally in Des Moines, Iowa is asking, you have a long season career as an executive. Do you miss the creative part and being a filmmaker and producer yourself?
That's such a great question. And I have to say that I made that decision a long time ago after producing a series that I really enjoy working with others to move their visions forward. And increasingly, as I move to the Ford Foundation, what I've been able to do is really bring creativity to building field infrastructure and really thinking about how to build out resources for independent filmmakers who I consider to be critical members of society that are routinely undersupported and marginalized. So to the extent that I've been able to bring some thinking and some resources to building out, infrastructure to support the impulse to tell stories about the world that you live in from your own point of view, that's really what I've been focused on.
Got it, got it. And you have been involved with specific titles in particular. I mean, we talked about POV.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit because you were there for and you were involved with that series for so long. Talk a little bit about your role there and why it was important for you to be a part of that series, such an iconic series.
Well, a POV was started by Mark Weiss, and then Ellen Schneider soon became a partner. She's still working with Active Voice. Mark is still very, very active, particularly in the climate space, and I really consider both of them to be mentors. And so I knew them from my work as a programmer and producer at POV. So we had a long history together. So in a way, joining POV at the time that I did, it was kind of, it was like extended family in a way. And of course, Lisa Heller, who's at HBO now, was there. And it was really the premier place to both support storytelling that is socially, as I say, socially relevant. And it was the showcase for independent media. It was the most important place for independent media to be shown to a national audience. So the chance to really evolve, again, those resources and work with those filmmakers and do the negotiating that you have to do to bring those to a national entity like PBS. There's a lot of fine detail work that you have to do to advocate for certain titles and certain issues. And so we really wanted to use POV to expand the possibility of what could be presented to a national public television audience. And I'd say every year we would bring in films that would really push the boundaries of what was possible. And that was the exercise, or at least that's what I felt, part of my role at POV. And we also built systems and resources for, we systematized them so that we were one of the first series to offer web resources and build a website for every single film that we brought in. We made sure that every single film had an engagement campaign. Every single film had a facilitation guide that was written by an educator. And so we were able to build out, in a way, it was a training ground for a lot of filmmakers who had never had those resources before. And that served to bring attention to the films and engage audiences across the country. And yeah, it was a really, really extremely productive and time and talented team.
Yeah, it seems like it. We have a question here from Isabella in Barcelona. She wants to know, are we living through the golden age of documentary storytelling? Because it seems like everywhere you go, there's more documentaries. What do you think about that?
Well, I've lived through several golden ages, so I feel like platinum might be so there's always a golden age for documentary, is what I would say. There is a time now where there is more, with the change in the streaming platforms, really embracing nonfiction as a creative, impactful storytelling genre. We're seeing it adopted in a way and brought into mainstream discourse in a way that, hadn't happened before. Documentary was kind of a niche practice. And you would have to look for it. Now it's everywhere. So that we can say could be considered a success. And I think that's why the golden age label is brought. But I think there's also a downside to some of this globalization and the marketplace that we're beginning to understand. But it's really available to very, very few storytellers. We still don't see the kinds of funds, national funds, that we want to see to support this kind of storytelling as a whole. And I think that the independent documentary, the independent nonfiction space, and then the wider independent creative media space is really fragile. And, where I'm concentrating now is Global South And there is such a will to tell stories that reflect your reality and have them be seen by people. And there's virtually no funding for it. So I hesitate to say that it's a golden age across the board.
Maybe you were early to this Global South, Rain in a Dry Land, that you were an
Yeah,
executive producer on. I do want to talk about some specific titles you're involved with. So
sure.
maybe
Yeah.
talk a little bit about why you wanted to get involved with that project in particular, Rain in a Dry Land.
Well, let me talk just more, if I can, talk a little bit more about what brought me to this international space. When I was at Sundance in particular, I started being called into international conversations where groups like the Arab Fund for Art and Culture, Indocs in Indonesia, DocuBox out of Nairobi, CNEX out of Beijing were all launching. And so we at Sundance were able to use the sort of internationally known moniker of Sundance to help them think about, regionally, contextually specific ways of building out support for nonfiction storytellers in their region. So I started traveling to all these places. So Beijing, I helped run 4 workshops in Beijing, year after year after year, to build momentum and to help them build the brand to raise money. Same thing happened with the Arab Fund for Art and Culture. And so there were a number of these organizations, so that when I went to Ford, I was able to say, listen, there's an emerging movement around the world. Nonfiction is our lingua franca, right? It's global. And we need to resource it, and we need to understand better what we're learning in these places and create kind of a learning exchange, because, we have so much to learn from folks that are working already and trying to be creative and being very successful at it, but we know virtually we're not connected, and we know virtually nothing about the lessons that they have for us, and vice versa. So this is how I became involved in a number of films on the international side, and really starting to track how people were moving through that creative process in the face of really a lack of resources. And the thing that gets you through is the human resources. It's the community, it's the network, it's the sharing. So one of the films that just came out at Sundance this year was Softy. And that's a film where, we met the filmmakers in Nairobi. We were able to refer them to other funders. Those funders, Doc Society, in fact, those funders were able to help, build out Softy as a film, and bring more resources to it. And then it got referred into Sundance and Tribeca, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really this interlinked network of resources and like-minded people that are always trying to move good projects forward, regardless of where they're from.
Right here in Atlanta is asking about those human resources, and
Yeah.
he says you're such a seasoned. He said thanks for sharing all this wisdom. Who are some of your mentors and who've helped you in this space throughout your career?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, I mentioned Bark Weiss and Ellen Schneider. I would say the woman that I worked with longest at WNET is a legend, really, a woman named Lois Bianchi, who, started New Television, which was the video art series that was on Channel 13. In fact, it was on PBS for a number of years, the public television system. And that was radical to have a series on national television. She and Susan Dowling put this together that was video art. So I started working on that series, and that's one of those spaces that you learn about the edges of what's possible. At the same time, she started a local public affairs show. So she was doing news, she was doing video art, she was doing, a series of local community-based reporting. And so, she was operating across all these realms. And I was fortunate enough to work with her for some years, starting as an assistant, then associate producer, and then ending up being a series producer. And I think that gave me, the sort of breadth of possibility in the nonfiction world. And subsequently, I've ended up doing just about everything you can in the documentary space, all the way from curating, producing, writing, working with artists directly, and then this field building that I talked about. And I think it was her breadth of vision that inspired me to take a similarly unconventional approach and just move to where the possibilities for pushing the entire field forward, were. And, POV, Sunday, that kind of explains that trajectory. But I will also say that working with artists like a Yancey or like a Laura Poitras or creative producers like Stephen Markovitz, who was on the show before, or Jocelyn Barnes. I mean, the ability to work with and support and co-vision together, storytelling, field initiatives, et cetera, because we all kind of have a similar alignment about the need for these things, is just a real joy and a constant inspiration. So I would say that the people I work with are my mentors as well. The filmmakers that I've had the honor to support are my mentors.
I'll let you go.
My husband is a mentor too, Norman Cowie. He's been there for the whole ride.
I bet. Wonderful. Before I let you go and ask you about the second part of it, and you've answered it to some extent about your mentees and people you're helping to shape. I want to ask you about people who are very early in their career, maybe first-time filmmakers, and anyone you have an eye on or you're helping to just bring them into the world a bit.
Well, I think that's always the case. You always want to be creating space for new leadership. And I, built teams that were really inclusive teams at POV, same at Sundance, same at Just Films, doing the same thing, with the moving image strategies. You're never going to be in one place forever, right? So as you're building, you're also bringing, and you're also making sure that you're mindful of creating space for new talent. As you move, through, whatever journey you're going to be having. So I think that's a really, really important point. And golly, I don't even know if I want to name, obviously the people that I have recently worked with, the people that I am now working with are all examples of this. The leaders of the organizations that are in this network are people that, we're new, and, we've been bringing, providing whatever help and resource and knowledge we can. So it's creative field builders and creative storytellers, I would say, that are really the focus.
Got it. Well, Cara, thanks. I just got to say, it's really a pleasure to have you on. And what I really appreciate is that you have a real understanding of the ecosystem and not just the filmmaking side, which you're obviously wonderful at, but you have this other sense of the industry, the wisdom of being in the space for so long. And I want to say we're grateful more than you know. I don't know if you get all the credit. You deserve more credit for what you do, seriously, because it's so important. And for you are, I don't want to, you pour gasoline on projects and they get out into the world. It's amazing to see how you work and the projects you select and the vivid artistry that you help render into the world. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yes. So that's our show today. Everyone, stay tuned to my social media for our next few episodes. And remember to take care of the art, because the art will always take care of you. Stay safe. Stay well. Take care, everyone.